This is a review of the 1974 TV movie Double Solitaire. This is by far the most obscure movie that I've ever watched and the most obscure movie I've reviewed on this channel. It has 9 ratings on IMDb, no user reviews. I'm probably going to add a user review after I make this, and you'll probably see my 10th rating there. It's rare that when you rate a movie on IMDb that you'll actually see the rating change after rating it, but presumably that will happen with this movie as I move from 9 ratings to 10. This is an obscure movie. The only way I could figure out to watch it was to buy a DVD of it on eBay from some guy. This is in a niche of films where they are rare, but they're also not desirable. And so fortunately, you can get this DVD for quite cheap. This movie was directed by Paul Bogart. That is a director I'd never heard of, who I don't think has made any major films. It stars Richard Crenna. Richard Crenna was in The Sand Pebbles, which I reviewed on this channel in a somewhat minor role. I remember remarking at the time in my review that he looked a bit like Bryan Cranston. He doesn't look so much like Bryan Cranston in this movie. Susan Clark is in this. She was in Airport 1975, was probably her most major role. Norma Crane, who played Golda and Fiddler on The Roof. That was her last movie, actually. She's in this film as well. And then some random people you can see on the back. This is everyone who's in the movie. Not a big cast at all. Why am I interested in this at all? How did I find it? Well, it's because it is based on a play written by none other than Robert Anderson, one of my heroes lately, who I've been dedicating the channel to, much to the chagrin of my few recurrent viewers. This is part of the Broadway Theater archive, and when I first received the DVD, I thought for a moment that I might have accidentally bought a play, but somebody filming a stage play or something like that, and not a movie. And in truth, this kind of is a play. It is a movie. It is legitimately, this is a movie. It's a TV movie. But, man, this is the bare minimum in terms of a film adaptation. There's only 6 scenes in this. So you have the sort of the same types of set changes that you would have in a play. And we really get the bare minimum in terms of staging. I think maybe all the scenes, I think maybe every scene in this was filmed on a stage. And it kind of shows the sets and the blocking are two-dimensional. That said, this is actually a pretty good movie. I mean, it is a play, and it's a pretty good play, and it's translated reasonably well into this movie. No frills, absolutely bare bones adaptation, but it's good source material, I think, and it produces a pretty good result. Double Solitaire. This is a film about marriage, unhappy marriage. Mainly, you can kind of understand where we're going with this. Robert Anderson, a lot of his plays, a number of his plays, were about marriage, but his sort of famous movies didn't really carry the same themes for the most part. Here, however, we get it big time. Robert Anderson himself was married twice. His first wife died, and then he remarried, and he married Teresa Wright, a relatively famous actress who's in movies like The Best Years of Our Lives and Shadow of a Doubt, I think. They were divorced, but the play that it's based on, and in fact this adaptation of it, came out prior to him being divorced. So it's unclear if this is detailing his personal experiences and unhappiness with his own relationship, or if it's just his friends or something like that. This movie is mainly about a couple. This is Richard Crenna and Norma Crane, or Richard Crenna and Susan Clark are the couple. I don't remember what their names are. I'm just going to call them husband and wife. And it starts with their parents, though, with Richard Crenna's parents. And it starts with them sort of planning out their anniversary. I think it's their 40th wedding anniversary. It's almost immediately clear that this couple, the parents, they're not particularly happy. They don't seem to like each other very much. The husband remarks something about how, or the wife remarks about how the husband loves taking pictures, loves photography, loves taking pictures, but has never taken a good photograph of her. And the husband says in a separate conversation that his wife is just so unphotogenic and such. So it's relatively clear early on that they're not getting along, and yet they have intricate plans for their anniversary. They want to have 4 projectors in the cathedral. They're going to rent some big hall to do this, and all their friends. This is clearly sort of a upper middle class, sort of Northeast family, it would seem. They're going to rent some hall. All their friends will join, And they're going to have 4 projectors, which will project slides, pictures from weddings on all 4 walls of the hall, creating this phantasmagorical revival of the institution, right? Creating a shrine to marriage itself, showing all these images everywhere you look, everywhere you turn. We actually get to see some of these slides as sort of intertitles in between the 6 scenes in this movie. The transition is that you get some like wedding slides that flick through, and they don't seem particularly romantic or triumphant when contrasted with the action of the film. This is kind of a nice stylistic device, and it's one of the few stylistic devices that exist at all in this film. Like I said, absolutely bare bones adaptation, but you can see that the source material is good. I mean, this is a pretty interesting idea here of their anniversary with the projectors. You have a hint of modernism there. You have obviously some sort of fetishization of the institution or something like that, or perhaps just some kind of deep insecurity is at the root of all of it as they invite their friends around and such. The parents also want to renew their vows at the wedding or at the anniversary, and they want their son and his wife to come and renew their vows alongside them. To quote roughly from the father, they want them to stand up there in the face of all the unhappy marriages and divorces and say that we made it. The catch is that the son is hesitant. Doesn't seem like he wants to do this. And his wife was asked the same thing. The same suggestion was made by the mother, and she also doesn't bring it up. She's also hesitant. Interesting. I had a professor in college who was a huge fan of the late Stanley Cavell, one of Stanley Cavell's books. This book is about, Pursuits of Happiness, the Hollywood comedy of remarriage, right? Here Cavell kind of suggests, looking at a lot of like screwball comedies, it's kind of interesting. But he's suggesting that the essence of marriage is not some finite ceremony performed in the past, performed one time. It's not some knighting. It's not a christening. It's not a one-time thing, but rather it's a continual mutual reaffirmation of a relationship. Surely that's the crucial thing in a relationship, is a continuing reaffirmation of it, recreating it, rediscovering it all the time. So a number of these screwball comedies, there are a handful of them that feature some kind of remarriage, where there's some plot device where they accidentally get divorced, and then they've got 30 days to decide if they want to get remarried or something, and of course they do in the end, or something like that. It's all sort of very light fare, and there's sort of a novel rediscovery of the romantic intrigue of the relationship. Perhaps it was dead originally, but this remarriage sparked a couple to re-examine each other and to rediscover each other. Okay, this film is basically the opposite of a remarriage comedy. It's not a comedy. It's a glum film, and the couple's inability or their hesitancy to reaffirm their vows is one of the central themes. It wears them down. It's not, like I said, it's not at first like a bitter hatred or anything. It's just a hesitancy at first, but it wears on them. And just like, one of the joys of a successful relationship is the continual rediscovery and reaffirmation of, the relationship. Here, the character's inability to do so becomes a hallmark of the relationship, exacerbating or even eclipsing the initial problem. Like I said, it wears on them that they're hesitant, that it is not immediately obvious what they should be doing, that things aren't what they once were. It wears on them, and this becomes a hallmark of the relationship. That's a thing of the past, a husk, or some tumbleweed or something. Beyond failing relationships, we have bigger questions about life without passion, and this is something that maybe you experience in adulthood to some extent. You enter adulthood, and you may find yourself contending with how dull it can be, how different things might be from your expectations. There are inevitable questions of a dull and dispassionate life. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, said Thoreau in 1849, right? And not a bad quotation. There's a scene in this movie where Richard Crenna is at a bar with his friend. The bar, it looks like, again, it's a two-dimensional bar. Seems like it's a stage. But he's at a bar there, going back and forth. I think Richard Crenna's character is an editor, and this friend is one of the authors that he edits or something like that. Richard Crenna says something along the lines of, what would I die for? Is there anything in my life that I would die for? He concludes no, and in fact that he would never even sign his name to a petition or go to a protest. His whole life is spent discussing the day's news. Interesting. He says that when he's writing out his checks, or when he's balancing his checkbook at the end of the month, which is a bit of a dated reference, but when he's reviewing what he spent, he wonders why he pays for all these things that don't bring him joy, that he's not passionate about, that he doesn't obviously and intuitively care about. His friend suggests getting an accountant to balance the books for him. Richard Crenna's character says, is that the answer, to remove myself from every aspect of my own life? Interesting. Like I said, the source material in this is strong. It's a good play. And yeah, alongside the romantic themes, we have this other, lingering theme of a dispassionate life. And in some ways, it's kind of similar, right? Where in a passionate life, in a vigorous childhood, you might be continually, rediscover your youth, your passion, your interests. But when things are not going so well, you wonder where those things went. And soon it wears on you and it becomes a hallmark of your life, how different it is from what it once was, or how empty it can be. What would I die for? Interesting question. Very common thing for people to wonder, perhaps. This is, for most people, something that is discussed, contemplated, processed alone, or not processed at all, perhaps. Not confiding. That's another theme of this movie. We go from, not confiding, not being able to talk. It's kind of ironic because for some relationships, for some couples, it would be invigorating, or it should be a hallmark of a relationship, seemingly, to tell a loved one about the struggles you're having, right? And so you might think that difficulties in marriage would be a thing to talk about with your partner that would strengthen your relationship or something. But like I said, this is a double solitaire. This is a story about not confiding, where that does not happen, and where every time it doesn't happen, it becomes more difficult for it to happen in the future, where people become more and more alone, despite ostensibly sharing a life. Of course, Richard Crenna has a friend in his author friend who he gets a drink with, but it's they more or less declared a stalemate, with the author being essentially a hedonist, not idealistic as he claimed that Crenna might be. They essentially declared a stalemate, with them leading two different types of lives, and with neither one having great advice for the other, which is also a somewhat common thing to have happen, I think. It's interesting. This movie kind of starts out with the characters having more or less accepted things. And as things go on, they start to decide more and more that they are in fact unhappy, that this not reaffirming the vows, the hesitancy over that, and the inability to answer the question, what would I die for? That those things, they begin to seem like more and more serious problems, more and more serious symptoms of something that's wrong with the way the life is being led. There's an interesting scene in this movie where the wife is talking to one of her friends, a friend that's single, a friend that sees many different men throughout the week. She says every man has enough interesting things happen to them each week to make conversation for one evening. She tells a story of one of the men she sees who's a movie buff, who likes to sit close to the screen, but who has a wife who likes to sit far. So each night they compromise by sitting in the middle, where neither one is happy. It's entirely possible that this will be my future. We'll see. But again, this question of a missing passion, and of processing it on your own. This movie, like I said, overall is an absolute steal for only having 9 votes. Like I said, it's bare bones. It's basically just a play, okay? But it's a good play. It's Robert Anderson, man. And already I think you can probably get the vibe. You can probably see how I'm into this kind of stark, bleak, social realism, psychological realism. Richard Crenna is pretty good in this movie. He has a few moments that are a little sheepish or a little cheesy, or something like that. He reminds me a little bit of the character Frank Burns in MASH, which is a horrible performance from, what's that guy's name? I don't remember. not good acting at all. But this is a slightly toned down version of that. So he has some sheepish moments at times that I sort of liken to that. But overall, I think Richard Crenna is pretty good. His friend at the bar is pretty good. I forget who plays that. Maybe Harold Gould, I think, possibly, the friend at the bar. And Susan Clark, who's the wife, she gets a little bit overextended, I think, in one of her big scenes towards the end. The parents are fine. Otherwise, it's fine. Like I said, there's kind of one stylistic thing in the movie, which is the slides in between. There's some sort of basically elevator music that is used as the score. It's okay. It's not bad. It's a little bit bland, but not too bad. Kind of low budget TV score, mainly played on a piano, sort of a electric piano kind of thing. But like I said, for 9 votes, I mean, you can't go wrong. If you can find the way to watch this movie, I would. If you live in the New York metropolitan area, I'll give you this, right? DM me, we can meet up, and I'll give you the DVD, okay? Maybe. If you're watching this like 10 years later, you should still give it a go, because the odds that somebody's taking me up on that are pretty slim, I think. But pretty decent movie. Let me say also that this film ends with uncertainty, like most Robert Anderson movies do. And in fact, I think this might be one of the most uncertain out of all of Anderson's films. The husband and wife, some of these issues do come out. There is a third act where the tension increases dramatically, where there is where things are said, right? But are things resolved? Well, not entirely. Husband and wife really don't know. Neither one of them on their own knows, and together they don't know. Nor does the audience. And such is life, and such is Robert Anderson. So, like I said, Double Solitaire. Worth the money, I think. Worth watching. A cool movie. And I think it is a bit of a shame that it has been not seen widely at all, because it's a reasonable adaptation of what seems like a pretty good play.